Hello everybody and welcome back to Assassin's Creed 3. As you can see, we're in the real world. We're in Brazil and we're about to start our next mission. Oh, this is so cool.
You copy now?
Loud and clear.
What's the plan?
According to our intel, the power source is being worn as a bracelet by some tycoon's trophy wife. We're working on pinpointing her location, but she's most likely inside a VIP booth on the stadium's upper level. I'll update you when I know more.
Now to find a ticket.
How to
We don't have time
pickpocket.
to play nice. Kill someone else.
Bit of a dick move, don't you think?
Well, I guess you could try and sneak past security instead.
I'll just steal someone's ticket instead, if I can. Of course he doesn't want to steal somebody's ticket. Somebody there.
That doesn't look like normal security.
Because it isn't. Those are Abstergo agents. Cross is probably here too. You need to be careful. Don't let them see you. Security's headed towards you.
Oh crap, dead end. Dead end.
Security's headed towards you. Hide. Hide.
Yeah, I couldn't do anything about that, I got trapped. I thought I could go through the crowd, I couldn't. Okay, so we can't go through the crowd, so we have to avoid that. This guy's nuts. I'm quite nuts.
That doesn't look like normal security.
Because it isn't. Those are Abstergo agents. Cross is probably here too. You need to be careful. Your target's definitely in the VIP area. The entrance is at the end of this concourse.
Where's VIP area?
Você viu este homem? Chame a segurança imediatamente se o vir.
Don't let them see you.
Great. We've set up a checkpoint.
Player detected. God, they say you no matter what you do. Okay, how the hell am I going to do this one? Because you can't get rid of you can't get rid of the posters. Maybe if it's not walking through there, I have to get to the next location, maybe.
Doesn't look like normal security.
Because it isn't.
Maybe I have to go over to that one.
Cross is probably here too. You need to be careful.
That door's open. Maybe I have to go through there.
Look out! Your target's definitely in the VIP area. The entrance is at the end of
Você
the
viu esse
concourse.
homem?
Where's the VIP? It's all right around there, innit? Oh, crap. There's guards everywhere.
Lot of security. Make sure they don't see you. Blending with the crowd is your best bet.
Segurança!
O que é isso?
Stick close to the crowd and you should be okay. Or look for a way around it.
Seriously, what is the deal with stadiums and piss troughs? It's disgusting. And who thought they were a good idea?
Troughs are time and cost efficient.
I don't even see a stall in here.
Deixa eu
What
ver.
if I have to take a dump?
Yeah, please just mute the microphone if you do.
Mute the microphone. No, I'm not going to do that.
Looks like I'm close. Shit! Another checkpoint.
You're gonna have to find another way around. Security's too tight here. Watch your back, they're on you.
Oh no. I don't know where else to go. Security there, security there. Oh, this is crazy. Am I meant to get there? Oh, there's an exit there.
Que bando de martinho! Passam 20 minutos simulando sexo anal e fatura milhões. Eu quebro as costas trabalhando 80 horas por semana para tirar 100 pratas e olha lá. Agora tenho que ficar aqui para ser insultado por brutamonte de terra.
Por favor, senhor.
Olha, aconteceu, só isso. A gente não queria que acontecesse. Só aconteceu. Sinto muito.
Sente muito? Ela é minha irmã, cara! A porra da minha irmãzinha!
A gente se ama. Pronto, tá aí, tá dito. A gente se ama e já faz muito tempo.
Eu achava que era meu melhor amigo e você aí transando.
Almost there, Desmond. She's just on the other side of the stadium.
Other side?
Oh, crap. There's another guard over there. Can I pass this dude?
Use the catwalks to get across.
Are they fighting down there?
Now, the power source should be in one of the rooms up here.
She's up there. She's up here somewhere. Where is she? Oh, is this dude?
Hey!
Hurry, Desmond.
Oh, for God's sake.
Get the fuck out of
Can't
my
let
way!
that happen.
No, Desmond. Let's not doing that. Chase him.
Okay, stop a second.
Aquele cara tá maluco. Aquele cara tá maluco. Aquele cara tá maluco.
I fucked up. I fucked up. Ran out of bullets.
Where is he? Oh, he's through there, isn't he?
Out of fucking bullets.
Oh.
Aquele cara tá maluco.
Oh. And now we're back outside.
Ali está.
Oh, for crap.
Better move. Okay, head for the metro. I'll hold the train for you.
Run away! Run away! Run away! Run away! Run away! Run away! I'm not fighting everybody. Run away! Quick! Quick going, Desmond! Oh, for God's sake. What is he doing that for? Desmond.
We can get back to Connor whenever you're ready, Desmond. Unless you want to plug in the power source first. Up to you.
Will she speak to me now?
So, what's the latest? Learn anything interesting while you were exploring?
They were working on some weird stuff towards the end. Trying to engineer new bodies and store their minds inside computers.
Failure after failure. It must have been hard for them.
I worry about it too. I mean, they say there's something in here that'll help us, but what is it? Why is it locked up if it's exactly what we need?
I don't know. Maybe it's dangerous. Maybe they wanted to make sure only you could reach it.
That's the other question. What makes me so special?
I guess we'll know once we open the door. Hey, I hope it's not uncomfortable for me to ask, but what happened with Lucy?
I don't know.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything.
No, it's fine. I really don't know. I was talking to my dad about it. It's hard to say. I mean, Juno definitely took control, but I think I agreed to it on some level. I think I let her in. No. That's not right. It wasn't her. Not exactly. It was more like a program. Does that sound weird? It showed me things.
What'd you see?
That if I didn't stop Lucy, Abstergo would get the apple, and we'd all be dead.
I still don't understand why she turned on us.
I'm sure she thought she was doing the right thing.
I gotta get back to work. You might want to do the same.
I don't feel so bad about killing her knowing that she was a Aspergo agent all along.
Come on, son. We got work to do.
Okay, he's not going to talk to us. Well, Sean talk to us. He hasn't spoken to us for ages.
Oh, unbelievable.
What's up?
Your politicians are constantly referencing the Founding Fathers and insisting they must have been in support of one thing or another. I have never seen such a blatant disregard for history.
That's just typical political propaganda.
It's also dishonest and delusional. How can anyone claim to know what these people wanted based off scraps of paper and wishful thinking?
They're looking for intent. What these men envision for our country and its future.
Idealistic and unlikely. I don't think most of your presidents and senators and judges care what the founders thought. They just want to know how they can bend old words to achieve modern goals. Who cares if they were deists or theists or wanted a central bank? Why do people need the validation? What should matter is what you, as an individual, believe, and why you believe it. What, are we so insecure that we have to find 18th century letters to validate our beliefs? Oh, look, Mum, a dead man agreed with me. Maybe. If you transpose the letters in his shopping list, you can plainly see he was on my side.
Jesus, Sean. It's a cynical way to look at it.
Doesn't make it less true. I keep trying to understand how men like Washington and Jefferson could dedicate their lives to the pursuit of liberty and equality, yet have no problem owning slaves. It's hypocritical in the extreme, and your history books make only passing mention of the subject, as if it were of little consequence.
They had a war to win. Country's future to secure. How could they deal with all these issues at the same time?
Spoken like a true apologist. We hear it today, too, that matters of civil rights and equality must wait. There are conflicts to settle, economies to salvage. What do any of these things matter if the people are not free and equal? All of them. I wish there was a way for us to share what we learn from the Animus with others. Imagine being able to accurately answer questions about the past, or experience lost civilizations.
But how would you cite it? We can't just reveal the machine's existence to the world.
Why not?
Desmond's right. It would be dangerous. And we still haven't found a way to manage the bleeding effect.
Maybe when we're done saving the world, we can look into it.
Even if we do manage to stave off the apocalypse, it's not like the Templars are simply going to disappear. I suspect our fight will continue long after this latest battle is finished. Oh, look at the time. Oh, doesn't time fly? Look, I think it's best we get you back in the Animus, hmm?
Okay, Sean. Let's go back in the Animus. Oh, should we check the emails? No, that's updated. Let's check the email, see if that's updated. No. No new messages. Okay, Animus it is. Let's go for a dive.
Oh, look at that. I found a third power source.
Already?
It popped up in an earlier search, but I've only just managed to confirm it.
Where?
There's a museum in Cairo with one on display.
I guess Connor will have to wait.
No, you stay. We need to find that key, and time is running out. I'll make the trip.
What about Cross?
What?
Everything's going to be fine. I'll be back soon.
Ready when you are, Desmond.
Oh, he better not die.
Winter approaches. The air is still and sharp with grim expectation. The others sense it too and go about their work with uncommon urgency. I would like to help them, but more pressing matters now demand my attention. The Templars have targeted George Washington directly, and will not rest until he is dead. I had hoped to shield him from this knowledge, but Thomas Hickey ended any hope I had of staying silent. And so I have resolved to share everything I know of the Templars and their plots, of who I really am. Achilles finds fault in this, and we argue every day, but there is simply too much now at stake to maintain restraint.
Don't do this, Connor.
Then what would you propose we do? Sit and watch while the Templars take control? We are sworn to stop them, or have you forgotten?
Assassins are meant to be quiet, precise. We do not go announcing conspiracies from the rooftops to all who pass by.
Who are you to lecture anyone? You locked yourself away in this crumbling heap and gave up on the Brotherhood entirely. Since the day I arrived, you've done nothing but discourage me. And on the rare occasions you've chosen to help, you've done so little, you may as well have done nothing at all.
How dare you!
Then tell me, on whose watch did the Brotherhood falter? Whose inaction allowed the Templar Order to grow so large that it now controls an entire nation?
If I sought to dissuade you, it was because you knew nothing. If I was reluctant to contribute, it was because you were naive. 1,000 times you would have died and taken God knows how many with you. Let me tell you something, Connor. Life is not a fairy tale, and there are no happy endings.
No. Not when men like you are left in charge.
In your haste to save the world, boy, take care you don't destroy it. Ha!
Officer's sword. Oh yeah, I'm definitely equipping that. Captain Kidd's sawtooth. So the axe. Yeah, that'll do. Yeah, that's sick. So the axe, we'll use that. It's snowing. Oh, hang on, we've got some more things for the database. Logbook. Animus. Here we go. You may or may not have heard of this one. This is the document in which the 13 colonies formally declared their independence from Britain. Congress voted to accept the declaration on July the 4th, 1776. Celebrated today as Independence Day in the United States, contrary to popular belief, the document wasn't actually signed on July the 4th. The first signatures weren't added until the declaration was formally transcribed sometime around the beginning of August. Others were added as the delegates arrived in Philadelphia. By some accounts, the final signatures weren't added until sometime in 1777. The declaration, with its statement that all men are created equal and that they had the right to life, liberty and the pursuit of happiness, became an inspiration for other revolutions that came after it, most notably the French Revolution, against the very government that supported the Americans in their bid for independence. Oops. Beggar's Opera. Beggar's Opera opened in London 1728. It's a musical, one of the earliest ever created. It was written by John Gay, a writer and friend of both Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift, two of the prominent literary figures of the day. The opera is both popular and controversial. Popular partly because it was an excellent skewering of Italian opera, which was very popular at the time. However, instead of complicated Italian songs, the Beggars' Opera featured folk tunes that the audience could recognise, meaning you could hum along even if you didn't know Italian. It was controversial because of the subject matter. It's set in the Newgate prison, and the main characters are all criminals, who act much like the upper classes. It was a send-up of the British nobility, including veiled criticism of the head of government, neither of whom traditionally have a sense of humour. I've never met a queen who liked a knock-knock joke. Actually, I've never met a queen. The Beggars' Opera was accused of being a base form of entertainment, because its main characters were criminals accused of causing increase in crime. It's nice to see that criticism isn't just for movies and video games. Bloody opera corrupting our kids. On the frontier, God, we've got loads. Battles of Lexington. On the night of April 18, 1775, British regulars left Boston on their way to Concord to raid rebel weapons stores. The intent was to make a quick raid, defuse rebel plans to attack the British and capture instigators John Hancock and Samuel Adams. Unfortunately for the British, the result was the beginning of the American Revolution. In other words, this battle was a complete disaster for the British, and that's not a sentence with which I'm 100% comfortable. The rebels had been tipped off about raids weeks before. They'd already moved most of the weapons the British were looking for. The night before the battle, Paul Revere and William Dawes brought word that the British were on their way. So by the time the regulars marched into Lexington near dawn, the local militia was waiting for them. Nobody knows who fired the first shot. The British blamed the rebels and vice versa. But in the end, the Lexington militia was badly outnumbered and retreated, and the British moved on to Concord. By most reports, the British were polite in Concord, which I'm sure their mothers would have been delighted to hear about, all apart from one moment, of course, when John Pecan threatened a local tavern owner at gunpoint. But to be fair, the tavern owner did know where the weapon caches were. Overall, things didn't really go awry until nearby militias saw some smoke rising above the town. They thought it was on fire and marched in, causing a skirmish at the North Bridge. By the time the British left Concord, more militia had arrived, outnumbering the regulars and raising tensions further. The new troops followed the British along the road, bravely firing at them from behind walls and the cover of trees. There was little the British could do to fight back, and they were tired and mostly out of ammunition. Some of the regulars even broke ranks and fled. For the rest, it was a long walk back to Boston. Rather than dispersing after the battle, the militia gathered outside of Boston Neck, starting the siege of Boston and the beginnings of the Continental Army. French and Indian War. This is one of many wars in the long-standing British versus French rivalry. Well, you might call it a rivalry, I'd call it a battle of wits with unarmed country. This particular war being over, who would come out as the biggest colonial power, of course, was enough that the British and French fight one another. They convinced a number of North American indigenous nations to join the conflict as well, hence the name French and Indian War. The war started in the colonies, but it spread to Europe, where it was known as the 7 Years' War. Before you pointed out, yes, I know the dates add up to more than 7 years. The conflict started in 1754, but war wasn't officially declared until 1756. But well done for spotting it, you mathlete. I bet you were popular at school. George Washington was the honour of starting the actual fighting, under orders of course. He was sent to create a fort in disputed territory. While he was doing that, he crossed paths with a French patrol. Washington attacked, the French retaliated. The British followed up by sending 2 full regiments of regulars to the fight, and so it began. The British fought a losing battle until about 1758, when they got a new Prime Minister, who decided funding the war effort was a priority. Possibly because of the whole French thing. Maybe he ate a bad baguette once. With the added support, the British, along with their indigenous allies and colonial militia, began to gain ground slowly but surely. Eventually, the French were driven out of almost all of their territory north of the Caribbean, something we in Britain celebrate with a special holiday called Every Day All Year. So the British won, but they were left with huge war debts. They tried to pay these off with taxes levied from the colonists they defended from the French, who would have had them all eating onions and saying, "Oui sir, non sir," before you knew it. The colonists objected, leading up to a series of protests which were part of the unrest that led to the American Revolution. Talk about gratitude. Zut à l'heure. Braddock Expedition. This battle was part of the French and Indian War. In it, Edward Braddock's force of 1,500 British regulars and militia were decimated by a group of French-led troops half its size. This is not something we talk about much in Britain. Braddock had been sent to capture Fort de Quence at the top of the Idaho River. His officers included a young George Washington, possibly because Washington knew the area, having surrendered at Fort Necessity the year before. Braddock's troops were about 10 miles from Fort Duquesne when they were ambushed by a group of French and indigenous fighters. Braddock's advanced troops were overwhelmed and fell back into the main body of the army. His rear guard didn't hear the order to stop and kept advancing into the main body of the army. The result was chaos. Almost every one of his officers was killed, with the exception of Washington. Braddock himself was fatally wounded. Washington had him carried from the field and he died 4 days later. An interesting historical note: Braddock gave his officer's sash to George Washington, asking him to preserve it. Washington did. It's still on display at Mount Vernon. Really? The battle is also known as Braddock's defeat, but interestingly no one knows why. I'm kidding though. If you need me to tell you why, I don't think you're really cut out for this. And because he lost. Paul Revere's Ride. Oh, there's so many. And the thing is, I don't think we're even halfway through this game, are we? We've still got quite a lot of history to go through. Paul Revere's Ride. On the night before the Battle of Lexington and Concord, Paul Revere and William Dawes left Boston to warn the countryside that the British regulars were on the march. In particular, they wanted to warn John Hancock and Samuel Adams that the regulars intended to arrest them. Revere left Boston by boat across the Charles River, taking the road across the Charles Peninsula. Dawes took the longer land route across Boston Neck. Revere arrived in Lexington first, but Dawes wasn't far behind. Once they delivered their warning to Hancock and Adams in Lexington, Dawes and Revere decided to continue to Concord to warn people there of the coming raid. They joined up with Samuel Prescott, who was visiting his fiancée in Lexington. Prescott lived in Concord and so knew the area well. Road trip. The three men were halfway to Concord when they were stopped by a British patrol. Revere was captured, but Dawes and Prescott broke away. Dawes lost his horse and hid in a barn for several hours before sneaking back to Lexington, but Prescott reached Concord to sound the alarm. Good thing they had him tag along. Years later, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow will write a poem about the event which rolled all of the riders into one, Paul Revere, which is why everyone knows his name and why Revere is so revered. Treaty of Fort Stanwix. This treaty was meant to resolve ongoing land disputes between the indigenous people and ever-encroaching colonists. King George III had established a boundary line in 1763, but it had no basis in reality. Colonists were already living west of the line when it was drawn, not to mention the land wasn't really the king's to divvy up. I'm sure that just slipped his mind. Kings can be notoriously forgetful, the poor darlings, when it comes to the rights of others. Members of the Iroquois Confederacy met with William Johnson at Fort Stanwix to negotiate a new boundary line on behalf of themselves and other smaller nations, like the Shawnee. I use the term negotiate rather lightly. In reality, the Iroquois didn't have much choice in signing the agreement. It was giving away some of their land and achieving peace, at least temporarily, or fight a long and drawn out war. The question was only how much. When the treaty was signed, it was generous to Johnson, to say the least, even handing up the lands the British had left to the Cherokee earlier the same year. In fact, the Stanwix Treaty was so controversial that the British-run Board of Trade ordered Johnson to renegotiate. He refused. Johnson made a fortune speculating on land. I imagine this treaty was quite a windfall for him. Battle of Fort Necessity. This was one of the opening battles of the French and Indian War, and it's important that opening battles are quite exciting, otherwise everyone just sort of loses interest. In 1754, George Washington was sent to the head of the Idaho River Valley with a group of Virginia militia. The land was contested territory between the British colonists and the French. Washington's mission was to retake Fort Duquesne and drive French forces out of the area. Washington and his troops attacked a French patrol at Jumonville Glen, in which would be the first acts of violence of the war. Washington expected a return attack and so had his troops build the palisade wall surrounding their supplies, Fort of Necessity, hence the name. But they might as well have called the Fort of Inadequacy because supplies ran low. Inadequacy because supplies ran low and the militia and their British regular reinforcements were quickly overwhelmed. On July the 4th, Washington surrendered, was allowed to retreat, and someone else was put in charge of naming forts. Could you imagine if he wasn't allowed to retreat and he was killed? How history would have changed. It was Washington's only military surrender, though he had plenty of strategic retreats. P.R. Spin was alive and well even then. Got New York and Boston to go. Buttonwood Agreement. The Buttonwood Agreement is the precursor to the New York Stock Exchange. It was signed in 1792 under a buttonwood tree on Wall Street, hence the name. Look, it wasn't a monkey puzzle tree. That would not be a dignified name at all. The agreement itself is a fairly simple. 24 local merchants agreed that they would trade only with one another and they would take a 0.25% commission on whatever they traded. And in case you're thinking 1792 is too early for there to be stocks to trade, it wasn't. The first war bonds were released by Alexander Hamilton in 1790, 2 years before, so you're wrong and should probably keep your opinions to yourself. Boston. Okay, there's quite a few in Boston. Battle of Bunker Hill. Bunker Hill was one of the first battles of the Revolutionary War. Technically, the rebels lost, but it was a Pyrrhic victory for the British. Let me set this up a bit. There were two places where rebel forces would have been able to mount attacks on British-occupied Boston. One was the Charleston Peninsula to the north, the other was Dorchester Heights to the south. When rumours started that the British were going to fortify the hills around Charleston, the rebels decided to act, by which I mean do something, not put on a little play. On the night of June the 16th, 1775, troops under the command of William Prescott sneaked into the peninsula, occupied Bunker Hill and built fortification on Breed's Hill. It was a tactically terrible choice. Breed's Hill was easier for enemies to climb, much more open to attack and close enough to the British ships in the harbour to come under fire. In fact, Prescott's orders were to fortify Bunker Hill. It's uncertain why he made the switch. Maybe he had trouble with B words like bunker and breeds. Probably thought it was fighting against the Belgians, not the Brits. Fortunately for the rebel army, it seemed the British were almost as tactically inept as they were. When General Hill landed troops at Moulton's Hill, he waited for reinforcements rather than attacking immediately. This gave the rebel forces time to shore up their fortifications. When Howe finally did attack, he divided his forces, expecting the disorganised rebel army to fall before him, which it didn't. In fact, the British forces attacked and retreated twice before winning the day, after they'd received more reinforcements and the rebels were mostly out of ammunition. The casualty reports are telling. 228 British soldiers died, including many of their officers, and more than 800 injured. On the rebel side, 301 injuries and 140 deaths. The Continental Army had shown they could hold their own against the better trained British Army. It's hard to say which side was more surprised by that. It still surprises me to this day. Boston Massacre. The Boston Massacre was the culmination of several fights between British soldiers and the people of Boston. A group of British soldiers fired into a crowd at point-blank range, killing 5. The reality of it is less damning to the British than it sounds. What started as an argument about a wig maker's bill, of all things, turned into a mob. Hundreds of Boston citizens kept 8 British regulars cornered for hours. By the end of it, many were holding clubs, throwing stones and taunting the soldiers to fire. Captain Thomas Preston was in charge of the regulars and tried to defuse the situation by talking with the crowd. They asked if his soldiers' guns were loaded. He admitted they were, but it would have been stupid for him to order them to fire, since at the time he was standing in front of them. It wasn't until one of the soldiers was hit by a stone, which forced him to drop his musket, that the regulars fired into the crowd, against the orders of Preston, who later testified he never gave the command to fire. It's possible his men mistook the taunt of the crowd for an order. The regulars were arrested and tried for murder. 6 were acquitted, including Thomas Preston. The other 2 were found guilty of manslaughter, but had their thumbs branded in lieu of the usual sentence, which was death. One of the interesting things about the massacre is what happened afterwards. That is how both sides tried to spin it to their advantage. The fact that most people call it a massacre should give you some idea of who won this particular PR war. Revolutionaries portrayed it as an attack on colonial liberties, and images of event popularised by Paul Revere showed an organised British force firing into the crowd, not a confused group of soldiers cornered by an angry mob. The British, on the other hand, referred to the event the incident on King Street. We're naturally calm in a crisis, unlike countries who insist on turning every minor confrontation into a free-ring circus. Anyway, the wig maker dropped his prices and it never happened again. I call it a victory for the bold. Boston Tea Party. This was one of the key events leading up to the American Revolution. Protesters, some dressed in faux native garb, boarded 3 ships docked in Boston Harbour and threw their cargoes of tea overboard to protest British taxes. Throwing tea into a harbour probably broke a world record for making the biggest cup of tea ever. Though if there is one statement guaranteed to roll Britain, it is the unnecessary waste of a perfectly good tea. So, simple enough, but the lead up is a bit more complex. The East India Company actually wanted to sell the tea to all of the colonies at a cut rate to boost its flagging profits. However, taxes on the tea would have to be paid to the British the instant the tea was unloaded in Boston Harbour, and the colonists had a long-standing problem with paying taxes to Britain when they had no representatives in British Parliament. Offering discount tea while still collecting the tax on it was viewed by the colonists as a trick to get them to agree to a Parliament authority over them. Protesters turned back ships carrying tea to New York and Philadelphia, and if that had happened in Boston, the problem would have been solved. Unfortunately, the governor of Boston wouldn't let the tea ships leave once they were in the harbour. Guess he figured the public would come round eventually and just pay the tax, because everyone likes a bargain, but that never happened. In fact, protests got bigger and bigger until a meeting at the Old South Meeting House. A mob broke away from the crowd there and dumped the tea, solving the impasse and wasting the tea. I shuddered as I wrote that. The British reacted to the protest by sending British troops under Thomas Gage to occupy the town. They also closed the Boston Harbour, part of several laws they created to punish the colonists that were dubbed the Cohesive Acts. Of course, these laws didn't gain them any sympathy with the colonists and led fairly directly to the outbreak of the revolution. Tea is important business. Certainly is. 4 left. Siege of Boston. The Siege of Boston began right after the Battle of Lexington and Concord. The colonial militia who had been gathered to stop the British raids following the British Army of Boston, encamped outside, bottling British troops and their loyalists, allies in the city. So they trapped them. At the time, Boston was a peninsula attached to the mainland by a thin strip of land known as Boston Neck. With this blocked, land access to the city was cut off. The siege lasted for most of a year, with only one major battle, Bunker Hill. But as with most sieges, it took a toll on the city of Boston. There were shortages, particularly of firewood, and many buildings were torn down to be used as fuel. Of course, the British targeted any rebel-associated buildings for destruction. As a result, things like the Liberty Tree and the pews from the Old South Meeting House ended up inside a fireplace. The siege ended shortly after the rebels attacked and fortified Dorchester Heights to the south of Boston, giving them the ability to fire on the harbour. Boston's governor decided to evacuate rather than fight. On March the 17th, loyalist ships sailed out of the city. March 17th is now known as Evacuation Day and is a holiday in some parts of Massachusetts. The fact that it is also St. Patrick's Day is mere coincidence, though it's said that in ancient Gaelic, evacuation means drinking as many pints as possible and being sick in a bin, so you never know. Stamp Act. The Stamp Act was the British government's attempt to recoup some of the money they spent during the French and Indian War by taxing the American colonists, who periodically benefited most from it. Parliament chose a stamp tax because it was simple, easily implemented, and the colonists couldn't smuggle their way out of paying. All papers, from newspapers to legal documents to lawyers' licenses, were needed to purchase a government stamp to be used. Colonists, however, didn't think Britain had the right to tax them at all, since there were no colonial representatives in Parliament, hence the snappy revolutionary slogan, "No taxation without representation." They also resented the suggestion that they were responsible for Britain's war debts, since the colonial militia had a huge role in fighting and winning the French and Indian War. Huge public protests were organised, run by groups who called themselves the Sons of Liberty. Merchants declared a boycott of British goods. Perhaps most importantly, the people assigned to collect the tax were threatened and intimidated into resigning. The Massachusetts stamp distributor was even paraded through Boston by the Sons of Liberty and forced to resign at the Liberty Tree. No stamp taxes were ever collected, and British repealed the Stamp Act in March 1766, but it was an entire victory for the colony's parliament, then passed something called the Declaratory Act, essentially stating that Britain had the absolute right to tax the colonists and there wasn't anything the colonists could do about it. Nothing, that is, except start their own country. I've always fancied doing that. Tea Act. The Tea Act passed in 1773. It was an attempt by the British government to prop up the British East India Company by allowing it to ship tea to the colonies directly from India, without having it go through Britain first. This made the tea much less expensive, even cheaper than the tea the colonists were smuggling from the Dutch, to avoid paying British taxes. The problem was that even with the cheaper prices, the British government was still collecting tax on the tea, meaning buying the tea would run counter to the colonial no taxation without representation stance. The move was seen as, and probably was, Parliament's sneaky attempt to get the colonies to unconsciously agree to one tax, in the hope of implementing others. The colonists didn't fall for it, and attempts to force the unloading of East India tea in Boston caused the Boston Tea Party, perhaps the worst tea party of all time. It wasn't even catered. You people are savages. Coercive taxes, or coercive acts. Coercive acts, sometimes called the Intolerable Acts, were a series of laws passed by British Parliament in response to the Boston Tea Party. Among other things, these laws replaced the elected Massachusetts legislature with an appointed one and closed Boston Harbour until the East India Company was reimbursed for the tea, which, let's be honest, was never going to happen. The acts were a major blow against Massachusetts' economy and self-government. The acts got their name because British Parliament hoped that the crackdown would coerce the citizenry into behaving like good little colonists and stop the violent protests, lest the same thing happened to them. Unfortunately, the acts had the opposite effect. It made it easier for Whigs to argue for independence and difficult for the Loyalists to argue that Parliament had their best interests at heart. It seems nobody likes a bully. That's just events. Okay, so we got recent events. I've got loads of things. Recent events, locations, people, animals, items, predators and prey. Social, political organisation, material, culture, Kayana, Kayaka. I don't know if I want to read these because I'm going to butcher them. I'm gonna butcher some of these names. Okay, I might read some of these in the next video. Oh, I'm stuck on a tree. Trade. I can trade. Hey! Sell. Yeah. What can I buy off him? Hang on, dude. Hang on, trade. What can I buy off him? Consumables. Oh, is that it? Screw it. I don't want anything. I'd sell what I wanted to. That's where I've got to get to. God, I'm miles away. Getting closer to it. How far have we got to travel? Is it down here? No, there's a bridge there I've got to go to. No. We've got to go back this way and go to a bridge. How far? Right next to it. Oh, he's got revenge on me then by kicking me. Here he is. Missing supplies. Right, that's going to start a mission. I don't do that. I want to stay here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to finish this video here, guys. In the next one, we will start this mission with George Washington. So until next time, guys, thank you for watching and take care.